The Contender by Robert Lipsyte takes place in the late 60s in Harlem, New York. The daily life in the New York borough influences the story by affecting each character. It is not the safest place in New York City. A character from our story, James, falls into this nightlife and becomes a drug addict. Alfred finds peace from the craziness of the city by boxing in a gym and training. Donatelli's gym is a significant setting in The Contender. In Donatelli's gym, Alfred is greatly affected by the people he meets and the new way of life he develops, changing him as a person.
Alfred is a dynamic character in The Contender, undergoing many changes both internally and physically. Alfred is a young high school dropout living with his Aunt Pearl in Harlem, New York. Drugs, poverty, and financial problems of this dangerous neighborhood gives Alfred a feeling of lacking direction of who he is supposed to be. Alfred makes a bold move and enters Donatelli's gym, changing his life forever, yet still has temptations with alcohol because of the training he has been doing in Donatelli's gym. He becomes stronger, he carries more self-worth, and most importantly, becomes a contender. Mr. Donatelli is the driving force of what causes the change in Alfred's life. As he is Alfred's boxing trainer, he is also his life mentor. Donatelli teaches Alfred how to be a contender and always tells Alfred things as they are, never sugarcoating the truth. James is Alfred's best friend and is another part of his life that seems to be leaving. James goes from a little boy hiding in the cave with Alfred to a kid struggling with temptations and getting into drugs. As the story goes on, James' presence is less felt until the end when drugs have completely ruined him. Pearl is Alfred's guardian. She takes care of him and loves him, although she hates the violence of boxing. She lets Alfred do it so that he can pursue his dreams. Throughout the book, we see her teaching Alfred and helping him through the struggles.
It takes place in the late 60s Harlem, New York. Alfred resides in the projects, a predominantly black neighborhood, being surrounded by people who would rather be criminals than college graduates. The first chapter tackles racial status based on the characters who claim they were forced by social oppression to do criminal acts. Alfred, the protagonist, refuses to partake in a robbery of his boss's store. Thus, he becomes alienated from his peers and his closest friend, James. Though he had a friend who worked at the boxing gym, Henry, who has always talked of the gym greatly. Alfred has an internal need to become someone better and even famous, recalling the speech he gave to his guardian, Aunt Pearl. Boxing is Alfred's salvation, and nothing will stop him from achieving greatness and success. He is brought under the wing of the stoic, thin-lipped Vito Donatelli, a man who has plenty of boxing champions under his belt. On the night Alfred creeps into the shabby building, he converses with Coach Donatelli. Donatelli reminds him of the fact that nothing will be guaranteed, and the road to becoming a contender is the work you put into it. Ultimately inspired, Alfred jumps into training, but struggles with the negative influences of James, Major, and Hollis. Drugs and alcohol holds him down, but in the end, he overcomes the obstacles and becomes a contender.
The theme of this novel is centered around the idea of perseverance. Growing up with all these temptations and loss Alfred dealt with, he had to grow and persevere through these tribulations.
As Alfred struggles with losing his best friend from drugs, getting beat up, and almost giving up on himself, he must learn to move past these things in order to become a contender. As he is joining these fights, Alfred gets beaten badly, yet he focuses on what's important. He must fight through the pain, the loss, the temptations, and focus on being a contender.
I'm Robert Lipsyte, the author of The Contender, and I'll be interviewing the characters from the story. This is our main character from the book, Alfred Brooks.
What's up, y'all?
And he's going to be asking questions.
Robert, could you explain to me the reason why you have made my character a boxer in your story and how it is significant in the storyline?
I have always written stories about sports since I could remember, and in this particular story of a boy dealing with a rough past, the sport of boxing dealt perfect for a story of trial and tribulation.
As well as myself being a boxer, why did you make me the only boxer that has had a bad supporting cast and a coach that doubts me?
My story of a young boy who comes from a rough past and overcomes many tribulations. In that case, Alfred having a group of people who didn't doubt him and a coach that doubts him. It makes the story of Alfred more heroic and really pushes the theme of perseverance.
Being a high school dropout was a big struggle for me. Having to work at Epstein's, taking care of myself, and not being around a learning environment. Why was this choice of a path for me so important in my role of being a contender?
Well, the road to being a contender, as your coach, Mr. Donatelli, would always say, is to never stop working. Yourself, being a high school, had to learn to overcome and adapt to an environment without teachers or many people that most people have.
When I forgot to turn off the alarm for Major, Hollis, and James that night at the grocery store, it served as a big part of my story. But in what way could it symbolize something else?
That was a very dramatic scene, and as I remember, they weren't very happy with you. But in fact, there was another meaning. That night symbolizes the final breaking apart of you and James. It is a moment that you knew he was a part of a different life. Bye. Our next guest is Mr. Donatelli.
Yes, thank you. In the book, I came out as a very straightforward man, as in I didn't say much. but when I do, it's nothing but the hard truth. What is the reason I'm so straightforward?
In the beginning of the book, when Alfred first meets you, you are really making sure he's ready, and you let him know the challenge of being a contender, being a straightforward person towards Alfred, really making your mentor role apparent.
Okay. Well, I now know that Alfred is a true contender, but in the beginning, when he came to my gym late at night, you know what I'm talking about, I wasn't too sure that he was a contender, that he had what it takes. What would you say was the reason I felt that he was not yet a contender?
You knew Alfred coming as a high school dropout, a kid who just quit school. Writing about you, I wanted you to be someone who cares about what someone could be, and with you knowledge of him dropping out, it only made sense that you doubted him at first.
I've trained many different boxers in my career. What has made the connection between Alfred and I different? What made it something to write a book about?
Alfred's story is special because of the way he came to boxing. That first moment that y'all met in the gym for the first time was something special. Since then, y'all's connection was felt. Writing about Alfred was perfect because it was a great story of a kid trying to make it with a hard-headed mentor helping.
Well, yeah, I remember like it was yesterday. That point when Alfred knocked out another fighter, I looked at him in the eyes, and he was not meant for this. I could tell that this was not right. What is significant about this moment between Alfred and Griffin?
In this moment, the setting had a crazy atmosphere. People were yelling racial slurs, and the tension was out of the roof. So when Alfred knocked out Griffin, it should have felt right, but Alfred was upset. This shows where his heart is. It's not that much that he loves boxing, it's that he wants out of Harlem and will work in any way, even boxing. Let's get started.
As we've seen in the story, and I am also regretful of these times, my relationship with Alfred disappeared because my hoodlum friends and later struggles with drugs as my relationship with Alfred helped the book be the way it is.
The tragic fall of James was one of the most important parts of Alfred's story. As we see in about every chapter, Alfred is asking people what James is, or just talking about him. That relationship change was the hardest thing in Alfred's life, and it pushed Alfred to be better.
How has the influence of drugs changed my life throughout the story?
In the story, James was hard to write. Seeing you fall to drugs was very sad. The setting of Harlem made this possible, and the drugs ruined your life instead of achieving goals like Alfred.
How have my friends influenced me throughout the story?
Just like earlier, the setting of Harlem comes with sketchy people, and unluckily, you got involved with these people, and unlike James, couldn't control yourself from peer pressure.
Why is it important that I come back later in the story?
You've been always important to Alfred. He always wants to make sure you're okay, so at the end of the book, Alfred has achieved being a contender, and it is important that he uses what he has learned and finishes a problem he's always had, but the one most important to him, which is making sure you're okay.
Okay, I got some questions for you.
Okay.
Mr. Lipstife, I've taken notice how much Alfred is obsessed with his boxing career. Though if there was no boxing gym and instead a soccer field, would you write him any other sport? And why did you choose boxing?
As I previously stated to Alfred, the trials and tribulations as a boxer goes through really evolves Alfred as a person. That's a great point. Like in my other books, I do write about other sports, and I could have done another one for this story, but while thinking about the plot before I wrote this book, boxing just really felt right, given the time setting of Harlem and the people themselves.
Okay. As you know, Alfred is a young adult. He could be swayed by peer pressure. Thankfully, he hasn't. But why would you make him hang out with addicts like James and wannabe thugs like Major? Does this serve as a greater purpose, showing that most people don't get badly influenced and that he learned a lesson from his peers?
The storyline of Alfred being around so many thugs and struggles in this tragic story, without these people and influences, he would have never went into the gym. Seeing bad people like this, Alfred does meet new and better people and does learn from them.
Okay. This sounds selfish of me, though. Making me an example of my non-existent music career set a lesson for Alfred to focus on his boxing and never give up.
The part of the story where you told them about your singing is really the first time we got to know you as a person. I think your story really helped Alfred know he's not the only one going through this and that he must work harder.
At the beginning, I've been worried for Alfred getting hurt in the ring. I still am now. What's some advice you would give me to be more successful as a guardian?
I think you've done great with Alfred, but honestly, he knows what he wants and he knows what's good for him. Instead of letting him know how scared you are, let him know that you support him. Hey, Major.
What up, Robert?
You hear
Ready for
that?
these questions?
Yeah.
Why am I the reason Alfred started a boxing train?
When you and the hoodlums beat Alfred up for thinking he snitched you out, another character, Henry, picks him up and tells him to go to Donatelli's gym and train. Alfred goes and trains because he doesn't want to be beat up again.
So why am I made out to be the antagonist of the book?
You beat up Alfred and became his rival. Once he gets stronger, you try to become his friend. You are a coward in the story.
When James comes back, why does Alfred finally do drugs with my gang?
Alfred feels peer pressure when your gang does them around him. Also, add into the fact that James comes in as bait to make him feel more comfortable, so he tries drugs for the first time and passes out afterwards.
Now why does Alfred feel that he becomes better than me?
Alfred has been training for a decent while and gets stronger, so he feels he is a bigger man and will now do whatever he wants.